to WCEG Network on WCEG Talk Radio.com. Click the live stream tab or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Dr. Wanzo, and I'm your host of Mind Matters for the next 1 hour. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Last but not least, the topics and opinions are those of the show host and guests and not WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support. Good evening again. Welcome to Mind Matters, where we discuss relevant mental health issues. I'm your host, Dr. Cassandra Wanzo. I'm a psychiatrist, and I've been practicing in the Atlanta area for the past 30 years. Our co-host is Norman Carter Jr. He's a retired Philadelphia police corporal. He's written a book that's very relevant to these times, entitled The Long Blue Walk, My Journey as a Philly Cop. It's available on Amazon for your purchase. He also hosts his own show on WCEG entitled Issues and Answers on Monday at 4 p.m. Hi, Norm.
Hello, doctor. How are you?
Great. Our topic this evening is the S word, suicide. Again, our topic is the S word, suicide. Quote, may this day bring you rest and peace, unquote. Again, quote, may this day bring you rest and peace, unquote. Those were the last words that the 30-year-old Chesley Christ, former Miss USA 2019, wrote on her Instagram page before she leaped to her death from the 29th floor of her luxury apartment building in New York City around 7:15 in the morning on Sunday, January 30th. She also left a note stating she wanted to leave everything to her mother, who was also a former pageant winner as well. The world was stunned. She was a successful attorney. She had an MBA. She was a correspondent on the show Extra and had 2 Emmy nominations. She had been a successful student athlete, a track star in college, and graduated cum laude. But she had everything to live for, lamented many. That's the point. You can't look at someone from the outside and presume to know what's going on in the inside. I repeat, you can't look at someone from the outside and presume that you know what's going on in the inside. Her mother described her as suffering from high functioning depression. These are the people who go to work, who take care of their children, who take care of their family. They're doing all these things, but they're struggling internally. They wear the mask. In 2021, Miss Christ wrote an article in Allure magazine that gave a glimpse of some of her struggles. In the article, she describes dealing with internet trolls and cyberbullies, They told her that she, quote, wasn't pretty enough to be Miss USA, unquote, and that, quote, she had the body of a man because of her well-toned body from her track days. Some people had actually told her, quote, go kill yourself. She talked about the microaggressions that she had experienced as a Black woman. She talked about the sexism that she experienced in law school and in the legal profession. She talked about her anxiety about aging and the value that this society places on youth. She talked about how the media had made a big deal about her being the oldest woman to ever win the title of Miss USA at age 28. She talked about her fear that she was, quote, running out of time to matter in this society's eyes. Quote, again, that she was running out of time to matter in this society's eyes. She also said that she cringed at the thought of turning 30. She was 30 years old. She'd also been a mental health advocate and talked about seeing a counselor. Her suicide was among a spate of recent suicides. Ian Alexander Jr., the 26-year-old son of actress Regina King. Mayor Kevin Ward, the 44-year-old mayor of Hyattsville, Maryland, who died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Moses Mosley, a 31-year-old actor from the Atlanta area who had been on Walking Dead, died by gunshot wound. Although yesterday his family was on the air saying that they thought he might have been kidnapped. But so far, all the evidence points to suicide. Then you have Jeffrey Parker, the 55-year-old CEO of MARTA, who laid on the tracks at the MARTA Eastlake Station and was run over by a MARTA train. Wow. Any thoughts, Norm?
You know, we just had someone in New York that jumped in front of a train just last week.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's maybe I'm thinking about Atlanta because it was the former head of
MARTA. That's what I'm saying. Jeffrey
MARTA.
Parker,
Yes,
the former
yes.
CEO of MARTA. Yeah, Jeffrey Parker.
Correct.
At the Eastlake Station. Man.
Well,
yeah.
I found some sobering numbers that might interest everyone.
Okay.
Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States.
Yes.
It was responsible for more than 47,500 deaths in 2019.
Yes.
In 2019, 12 million American adults, seriously thought about suicide.
Mm-hmm.
These are from the CDC.
Mm-hmm.
3.5 million people made a plan, and 1.4 million attempted suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Suicide rates in the United States have increased for about 33% from 1999 to 2019. Mm-hmm. Very, very sobering. And it has, and they go across all strata. I know you named a few people who were high profile. The one person that I always had a question about was Whitney Houston.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That's very questionable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and we're now going to go back to the aura of shame that surrounds people who are having mental challenges or mental health challenges.
Right, the stigma.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And not only for that particular person, but for their families and friends, because no one wants to admit that their loved one committed suicide.
Right, just like that family with Mosley, they don't want to admit right it's suicide, so they're saying he was kidnapped.
Yeah, I had that actually happen in my family several years ago with a cousin of mine. It was only after, because of my being a police officer, I was able to get in touch with some of the investigators, and it was fairly well established that it was a suicide, and I had to communicate that back to his parents. But it's a devastating thing. We used to say that suicide was the act of greatest revenge or something like that. I think it's more than that. In fact, I know that it's more than that.
What are you saying that it's more than that? What are you saying?
Well, people used to say back in the old days that suicide was a sign of the greatest revenge. In other words, it was showing other people how much you resented whatever they did. But now we know that many factors increase the risk of suicide or protect against it. And we could talk about people who have experienced violence, including child abuse, bullying, sexual violence. They have a higher suicide risk than normal people. Yeah, so those are some of the factors that we need to look at.
Some of the other risk factors are, well, depression is one of the biggest risk factors. Not only depression, but anxiety and other psychiatric disorders, chronic pain, a family history of suicide, a prior suicide attempt, impulsivity in adolescence, social isolation, financial problems, legal problems, job problems, what we call adverse childhood events like neglect or abuse, bullying, relationship problems, sexual violence, and easy access to lethal means like firearms and medication. So this covers like a lot of different people, who would be at risk. One thing I'll say about the facts is that among white Americans, suicides decreased from 2019 to 2020 by 3%, whereas from 2014 to 2019, suicide rates among Black people increased by 30%. And then from 2001 to 2017, suicide deaths among Black girls increased 182%. Also, suicidal thinking and behavior has become more common during the pandemic that we've talked about in previous shows. Whereas before the pandemic, it was like 8.5%. Since the pandemic, it's tripled to like 27%.
I think something that you just mentioned, particularly among the tremendous increase among African Americans, I think a lot of that, and other people have borne this out, is that the effect of social media, on young people who live out their lives through social media. It's a type of bullying that seems to be pervasive, and what people don't realize is that younger people don't just shake this off, and some do result to suicide as their only way out.
But in Miss Chris' case, she talked about the bullying that she received, and she said in the article she had to delete so many emojis and things that people had sent her because it was so negative.
Well, let me give you a sobering number again from the CDC.
Okay.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death for people ages, think about this, 10 to 34.
Wow.
10 to 34. Can you imagine a 10-year-old committing suicide?
There have been, I think someone sent me an article about a 7-year-old that in Atlanta in 2019 had access to his parents' firearm and shot and killed himself, a 7-year-old in 2019 here in Atlanta, 7-year-old. And then online, Amazon has been selling sodium nitrate, which is a preservative, but people—
It's a poison.
To kill themselves. And there was a recent suicide of a child actor who bought some and killed himself, but they are still selling it online, and young people online have access to it, and they're killing themselves with sodium nitrate.
That is bizarre. That is bizarre. And it's a very simple thing to rectify if we just take it off the market.
Yes, yes. So I'm not familiar with it. So other than it's used as a food preservative, but what's your familiarity as far as how it's used?
That's all I've ever known it to be used for.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure why.
Especially your deli meats and fish.
Oh, so I'm not sure. Why do they sell it online to begin with? I don't know.
I don't know. Unless people, I don't know. That's insane. It's just, I mean, the not the people who are taking it, but they obviously need help. But the fact that people are making money off of this and know what the end results will be. That's horrific.
Yes, yes. Because it says there have been many suicides that have been attributed to the sodium nitrate. I don't know how much it takes, but whatever it is they're buying on Amazon. And I looked up an ad. It was like $12 to buy it. $12. Yeah.
Pocket change.
Yeah.
For some people.
Right.
Not for me.
So I want to talk a little bit about depression, since that's one of the greatest risk factors for depression, for suicide. So there's a difference between, like, when we talk about being depressed or feeling sad, because it's normal to have fluctuations in our mood. We can be sad this day and the next day not. So that's normal, having normal ups and downs. But when I'm talking about depression, I'm talking about clinical depression. And in order to have clinical depression, well, first of all, depression is an illness, just like any other illness. It's a disorder of the brain, and it is treatable. So in order to be diagnosed with depression, you have to have at least 5 of the following symptoms for at least 2 weeks. 5 of the following symptoms for at least 2 weeks. A persistent, sad, empty mood, excessive crying, reduced appetite and weight loss or increased appetite and weight gain, physical symptoms that do not respond to treatment, such as headaches, digestive disorders, and chronic pain, irritability, decreased energy, feelings of guilt, worthlessness, helplessness, hopelessness, pessimism, sleeping too much or too little, waking early in the morning, loss of interest in activities that used to bring you pleasure, including sex, difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions, thoughts of death or suicide attempts. So you have to have 5 of those symptoms for at least 2 weeks to be diagnosed with a clinical depression. So what causes depression? Depression can be caused by many, many factors. Among those are cognitive factors, meaning a negative pattern of thinking. Genetic factors, because depression can run in families. Certain medications can bring on depression. There's certain illnesses that can bring on depression. There's situational factors that we've talked about, job loss, relationship issues. And also the thing that most people don't know, that you can have depression for no reason. It can come on without any apparent reason for depression. So those are some of the things that can cause depression. So what are some of the treatment options? There's antidepressant medication. The way that the antidepressant medication works is in your brain. You have chemical messengers, and the way the brain cells communicate with each other is through these chemical messengers. When you're depressed, we think there's a lowering of these chemical messengers, so the messages can't get across. The way the antidepressants work is they build up the level of these chemical messengers. And some of the names of them you've probably heard of: serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. Different antidepressants work on different chemicals in the brain, and some work on a combination. But just the medications alone is never enough. As we're complete beings, we also need the talking therapy to go along with it to deal with whatever the external stressors and issues are. So the combination of the medication and the talking therapy is what's needed to deal and treat depression. As I said, it's very treatable. People can get better. There are a lot of myths, surrounding depression, like, oh, it's something you can just snap out of. You can't. I know in the faith community, there's some people say, well, oh, you can just pray it away, but you still need the treatment. You can't just pray it away or pull yourself out of your own bootstraps. I know Norm had mentioned about this revenge theory of depression. In my experience, the people who I've dealt with who have had suicide attempts and have been very depressed, they describe the depression as being at the bottom of a deep, dark pit with no light, no way out. And they kill themselves not out of a desire to die, but they kill themselves to end the pain and suffering. So
well, I did a search for this program of high profile people who have committed suicide. And this is from a note left behind by an Iris Chang. She was I think she was an actress or something. She was an author and journalist. But she wrote a book called The Rape of Nanking, which some of you might remember. But here is her suicide note, which goes along with what you're saying. I am doing this because I am too weak to withstand the years of pain and agony ahead. Each breath is becoming difficult for me to take.
Wow.
Please forgive me, because I cannot forgive myself. This plays exactly into what you were saying. And I see we have had a comment from someone who has a daughter who's struggling with suicidal thoughts. I'd just like to add, and I know you will probably do this later, but if you need help or someone needs help, you can call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK.
Yes.
It's 1-800-273-TALK. And converse with someone who can help you.
They also have a crisis text line where you can text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. Again, that's HOME to 741-741. So yes, that's very important. If you have a friend or relative, that's thinking about suicide, don't hesitate to have a conversation with them. There's this myth that if you ask someone about suicide, you're going to plant the idea in their mind. That's further from the truth. You need to ask if they have made any talk at all about wanting to die. Please take them serious. There's often the attitude, well, if they were going to kill themselves, they would have done it. And if someone is expressing it, then you need to talk to them about it. Have a conversation with them about it, especially if you hear someone saying that they don't want to live, if they're looking for ways to kill themselves, like searching online to buy a gun. They're talking about feeling hopeless, no reason to live. They're talking about feeling trapped in unbearable pain. They're talking about being a burden to others. Often people self-medicate if they're increasing their use of alcohol and drugs. If they're sleeping too much or not a little, if people are more withdrawn, or if they're showing rage and talking about revenge or showing extreme mood swings, then you need to talk to that person. Be open and honest with them, because suicide is real and it is preventable. We all can play a role in preventing, setting them up with the crisis line, asking them to go get help with a therapist, psychiatrist, whatever it is, to interrupt, that pattern. They need to go get help. So you need to ask them Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Have you thought about ways to kill yourselves? I always ask it with my patients. Oftentimes they'll like store up their medications. Or I had one patient who really did go online to try to buy a gun, but he couldn't get it because of the waiting period here in Georgia. So he came to see me in the interim before he was able to purchase the gun. So please take it seriously and ask your family and friends. I heard a quote that someone said, is talk to your strong friends. Like the people you think, oh, there could be nothing possibly going wrong. Talk to them too. Because I said you can't tell from the outside looking in who's experiencing internal struggles, who's depressed and suicidal. You cannot tell it from the outside, and anybody can get depressed. Any age, race, occupation, anyone can become depressed.
I think we also had to remember that some medications that you take for one particular ailment can also have a side effect of causing depression.
Right.
So you have to be careful of that also.
Some medicines for high blood pressure, different steroids are notoriously known, to cause, like prednisone that people take for various conditions can cause mood swings. So different meds, so you have to, look for the warnings. Even some of the antidepressants in people under 21 can increase suicidal thinking. So you have to be cautious when young people are on antidepressants, because there have been some studies showing that it can increase the risk for suicidality.
Yeah, it's one of those sad things. The one thing that it's a saying that I made up many years ago, and it applies for this, that people underwater don't feel wet. And you have to think about that, because a lot of people who are under mental duress don't realize that they're in the situation that they're in. And they don't have the ability, particularly like this lady, Miss Chris, they're in a place where, number one, they usually isolate themselves like she did. And they don't have the conscious ability to say, I need some help, because in their mind is telling them this is the end, or I only have one option. And that's sad. And so sometimes it's important that those people who are close, who know that this person has, and this lady, she had a history of challenges that you have to keep, and you can't let those people be isolated by themselves without staying in close communication with them on a regular basis.
Exactly. And so she was trying to put on this mask to the world. And of course, on social media, she's only going to portray herself in a positive light, because she's got all these people who are looking up to her, but I wonder about, because she said her mother was her closest friend. So I'm wondering to what extent that she revealed it to her mother, because her mother said that she didn't even know until the last minute. So, so it's like she had to put up this front with her mother too. And I was looking at the mother's background. Now the mother had won Miss North Carolina in 2002. And Chesley said that the reason she went into pageants was because her mother did. So she was trying to please her mother and lived up to her mother's expectations. Her mother had also been an athlete track star too. So she was following her mother's footsteps and trying to live up to her mother's ideals. And then once you enter that world of beauty pageants, I was reading how it's really stressful, because you have to be perfect, and they're monitoring your weight and how you look, and you have to be a certain way. And so once you're into that kind of mentality, you're trying to be perfect. There's all this pressure. So I'm wondering to what extent, was that, bearing on her? Because she said that the idea of turning 30, she was cringing at the idea, and how the society places, value on youth and looks. And so she was very much caught up into that. So for 30 for her was almost like, the end of the world. 30 years old for her was old.
Well, you point out something, doctor, that flows into something else, where you just mentioned how this young lady felt as if it was her responsibility to emulate the successes of her mother. And obviously in her mind, she was falling far short of that. And we have people who are born gay, who feel as if they are forced by the pressures within their family or their friends to present themselves as heterosexual when that's not who they really are. And there's a high suicide rate among people who do this. So what you have here is people feel that they're being forced out of who they really are.
Exactly. And now you have this law in Florida that they're trying to pass where you can't discuss gender identity issues or being gay. And so what if a child, in the school is dealing with that? So you just, we can't talk about that. So just, brush that child aside.
Florida is turning to be the polar opposite of California. I mean, you can go to California and it's whatever goes. And now you want to go to Florida and it's nothing goes.
Exactly.
I mean, this is sad. And that there are people who are buying into that. I mean, there are voters who are buying into that. And that's why this type of nonsense is being, there are attempts are made to put this into law. It's sad. And all you're doing is you're driving more people over the edge.
Exactly. Speaking of like another population that has a high risk would be teens who are dealing with their identity and gay issues. They have a high rate of suicide too, a very high rate of suicide attempts and suicides. It was interesting, like the mayor of Hydesville was like openly gay. So I don't know what issues he had with that, but he was openly gay.
I always think about, I went to an all boys school, all boys high school. And we had two young boys who went to that school, our school, who were obviously gay, obviously gay. No one at that school bothered them. This is an all boys school. They went through school. They were never harassed in any way. And I just don't understand how now this is sort of flip-flopped, where now people who are obviously gay are become harassed, intimidated, going through school. I just don't understand that. It makes no sense.
Right, and then in the trans population, you have all the murders and assaults among the trans population.
And a lot of this comes out from people who feel that their own sexuality is challenged.
Yes.
And I mean, the people who are the victimizers.
Exactly.
Yes. And, we have to look at them like, maybe you need some issues you need to resolve. Rather than taking out violence. It's almost as if by beating a homosexual, they're actually beating trying to beat something out of themselves.
You hit it right on the head. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Someone asked, what are our thoughts on certain school library books being banned? I just think it's horrible because you're limiting free speech and thought. And so you just only want to be like China, have people just know about it thinking one way because they're a very dictatorial society. So I'm definitely against banning books, but I know that they banned Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye and several books. My son was telling me about one of his childhood books that I used to read to him called Where the Wild Things Are, that they banned that little childhood book. I mean, all kind of books that they're banning for whatever reasons. And then you got the whole critical race theory. They're afraid for their children to know what they did in their past about slavery and the impacts. I mean, they don't want their kids to know the truth. I just think it's really crazy.
Well, I think that when you go to, let's take a book like Huckleberry Finn.
Okay.
That might not be proper for elementary school, middle school. 11th and 12th grade can pretty much handle that type of book. But we also had to remember that there is no society in the history of this world that engaged in banning books that ended well.
Exactly.
And we have to remember that. And there's this campaign that where we have right now where people are trying to rewrite history or
Yes.
suppress history.
Yes.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Right. Right. Especially so, like you said, the 1619 Project, critical race theory. I mean, basically, critical race theory was taught in law schools. It's not being taught in schools, but anything that has to do with race and race relations, they don't even want you to mention, and they will use that as saying it's critical race theory, because anything that has to do with race that they don't want to talk about, their own, racism, they're uncomfortable with talking about that and don't want their children to know about it.
And it's funny, but not funny, sad that there's a movement now to outlaw Black history teaching.
Oh, yeah, Black History Month, yeah.
And the part about that people who don't know what they're talking about is that, and I go back to Black history in my school days, is that there was information about heroic Black people that was written out of, that was not included in our normal history books. So Black History Month was not about talking about segregation or desegregation or anything like that. It was to enhance our self-esteem, to let us know that there were people of our color who were successful, who made significant changes to improve this world. It was never about something where we were placing blame on any race or anything. And I think what you're seeing now with everyone, and I mean everyone, who's talking about, who's challenging this critical race theory, which is only taught on a graduate level, never in the other levels. These are people who are ashamed of the guilt of their parents and grandparents and those before them. And what you need to do is be proud of who you are right now, unless you are mimicking those traits that your grandparents and great-grandparents did so openly.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry, we're talking about mental health.
But that's no, it is mental health, because in terms of esteem of Black children, they need to know the truth about what we did. Not the only history we know is that we were slaves. They need to know about all the different accomplishments that we as Black people have done, the inventions, all the great civilizations, because it helps contribute to a positive mental health, to your positive esteem. So it's very important to have all those things. It's very, very important. I remember I was in high school in the 60s, the only Black person that we ever knew about in history was George Washington Carver. That's the only, and we as students, when I was in high school, we had a walkout demanding Black history. And then at some point they did get a book that incorporated Black history into our curriculum. But as students, we had a walkout because we didn't learn anything about Black history, junior high, high school, except George Washington Carver. That's all we knew about.
Yeah, it's and that's the reason that we had, it used to be Black History, Negro History Week. It used to be Negro History Week. And thank you, Dr. Woodson, for that. And then that's expanded in recent years to Black History or African American History Month, which I think is it's a good idea. And it's an opportunity to learn more about the actual history, not only of this country, but of the world. What can I tell you?
Wow. Oh, let's get back to depression. What I'm saying can affect anyone. Like years ago in Atlanta, there was a program called RAFA at West Paces Ferry Hospital. And it was a program to treat ministers. And we had ministers on the union who were dealing with depression, because that's something that's not really talked about. But we had a specialized unit where we worked with ministers to help them overcome their depression, because a lot of ministers get burned out, get depressed. And there've been, I don't remember their names, but I know I remember hearing of some ministers who killed themselves by suicide. So that's one area where people don't talk about, but ministers get depressed too and burned out. Everybody can get depressed and burned out. Everybody, like I said, it's no respect of age, race, occupation. Anyone can become depressed.
Yeah, we also can add
Mhm.
that runs throughout the medical profession,
Yes.
including psychiatrists and
Oh, yes.
psychologists.
Yes.
Yes.
I was really sad to hear there was this one psychiatrist friend that I knew I hadn't heard from her in years. And then I found out she had, killed herself by suicide. She was about my age, a psychiatrist. Yeah, killed herself by suicide.
It's
Mhm.
and what people don't realize, what now I'm going to use your profession
Mhm.
and even people in the medical profession,
Mhm.
is that you become, it's almost like the plant osmosis, where
Mhm.
you become consumed
Mhm.
by the sadness and misery of the
Mhm.
people that you're treating,
Mhm.
little by little, by little, by little, by little, and
Mhm.
it piles up over the years. It doesn't happen like in a month or two,
Mhm.
and you don't realize that it's happening
Mhm.
until it's
Mhm.
way out there.
And there's no shame in getting help. And I admit, I think I've talked about it when I was doing my residency in New York City. I was going through a divorce. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. I had my son who was 6 months at the time. I mean, I was dealing with all kind of stressors. I had lost my appetite, lost weight, and I was feeling very depressed. So I went into therapy. In fact, I used to see my therapist 3 times a week throughout my whole residency. 3 times a week I saw him, to help me. I needed it. Yeah.
It's realizing that you need the help, and you had the
Yeah.
sensibility to reach out for it.
Right. Because if I hadn't, I don't know where I would be now if I hadn't, because I was like really weighed under. So 3 times a week I saw my need, 3 times a week.
Yeah. And then we have people who self-medicate, and that creates its own additional problems.
Exactly. It's like with alcohol, like when people use alcohol initially, it gives you a euphoria or a high, but the net effect of alcohol, it is a depressant, so it will make you more depressed. And oftentimes people will use alcohol or the drugs to get the nerve to go ahead and do, to kill themselves. They'll use that to give themselves the nerve to kill themselves.
Which really makes me take me back to Whitney, and I don't mean to really diminish her or anything, but there's so many people who are caught in that same situation. Almost similar. I knew a lady many years ago who, and this was a fairly well-off female, and she came from a very wealthy family. She had multiple suicide attempts that failed. I mean, they failed. And she eventually went to therapy and began to heal, so to speak. She got sick one day, and she took a few aspirin for the headache that she had, and her system had been so run down by the abuse that she had done to her body that those few aspirin killed her.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's, and here, when I think about Whitney's had heart disease. I'm sure she had enough money to know that she had heart disease. And then you add, she had marijuana, Xanax, Benadryl, and other medications in her system.
That's what Whitney had.
Whitney Houston. Yeah. So she has heart disease. She has cocaine, marijuana, Xanax, Benadryl, and other things in her system.
Wow.
What was the expectation?
You're right. That was real stress on the heart, because the cocaine is a stimulant, and then the Xanax is will bring you down, and high. That's very toxic combination. Yeah. Wow. And then I'm not sure her daughter, I know, had substances too in her system.
Correct.
Right. Too. So.
Yeah. Well, she learned from her parents. I mean, if you remember, it should be an example to everyone. television made a lot of money on Whitney and Bobby Brown and the children, showing them on a weekly basis, intoxicated and high on, and they made, those networks made millions of dollars off of that. And here you had a family in crisis, and they were nothing more than entertainment.
Wow.
And I doubt if you will see those programs repeated.
Wow.
Because there needs to be a certain amount of guilt access to those people who knew that this family was in crisis, and yet they made them entertainment fodder, which is sad.
Exactly.
And that's a perfect example. A perfect example for me. Don Cornelius, who we thought was such, stellar star.
Yes.
Shot himself.
What he was suffering from? What kind of illness? He had some kind of illness.
Well, he had deteriorating health. He had brain surgery. He was broke, and he had a very contentious divorce.
Okay.
Now, if you listen to or watch the series that's on now about the Playboy secrets, he was very active with the Playboy Club. So.
Oh, that's right. They accused him of a torture.
Oh yeah.
Abuse.
Yes. The very successful Anthony Bourdain. I used to watch his shows.
Me too. I loved his show.
Yeah.
I loved his show.
If anybody's seen more grounded than him, I don't know. But he had a history of issues, of drug addiction issues.
Right. He died depression. By hanging. He died by hanging. Correct. Okay.
And I looked at, and this is sort of evidence by Miss Chris Capucine, an actress from many years ago, did almost the same thing as Miss Chris did. She very successful.
Which actress?
Capucine. She was very, very popular in the 60s. I mean, she was in What's New Pussycat, The Pink Panther, Walk on the Wild Side. Beautiful woman. Jumped from the 8th floor of her apartment building.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, these are, I'm talking about successful building. Simone Battle, young Black girl.
Her name is familiar. Was she? Her name is familiar. What was her field?
Yeah. Well, she was a contestant on a program called The X Factor.
Oh, The X Factor.
And a member of a girl group, I guess it's singers, called GRL. She was known for Zoe 101. These are things I'm not familiar with. What You Need and Metamorphosis. She died at 25 years old by hanging herself. Wow. She had been depressed over financial problems and the fact that the group that she belonged to wasn't having the success that she wanted to have. Robin Williams, comedian, happy guy. Freddie Prinze, another one, at the pinnacle of his success.
How about Marilyn Monroe? Remember Marilyn Monroe?
Oh, absolutely.
Marilyn Monroe.
Well, her death there's so much scandal around her death that we don't know whether it was suicide or murder.
Okay. What about Kate Spade, the designer, Kate Spade?
Yes.
Handbags. Then, Ernest Hemingway, the author, and then Margot, who I guess is his granddaughter.
Granddaughter, yes.
Granddaughter, yeah.
Yes.
Margot Kidder, Alexander McQueen, the designer. Yeah. So, I mean, on and on. These are the people that we know about, the celebrities, the high-profile people.
So success, what we view as success, there's a little bit more to it.
Exactly.
And sometimes I think it's that some people aren't prepared for the success, because with success comes a lot of responsibility.
Exactly. In fact, I had I can't say who she is, but a very well-known actress as a patient. And she would always say, more money, more problems. That's what she would always say. More money, more problems.
Popular song. Yeah.
More money, more problems. So she always said more money, more problems. Yeah.
It's sad. And so, again, I think we have to watch out to actually be our brothers and sisters keeper
Exactly.
in this issue,
Mm-hmm.
because there are some signs that you can look for.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we better repeat that number again.
Okay. 1-800-273-TALK. 1-800-273-TALK. That's the call. The number to text is text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. Again, text HOME, HOME, to 741-741, and 1-800-273-TALK. Yeah.
And if you know someone who has tried to commit suicide and is not successful,
Mhm.
if they don't get the proper counseling, they're going to try it again. Assume that they will try it again.
Right. So don't be afraid to talk to someone. You are not going to put the idea in their mind. That's an old myth. That's just not true. I had a question. I was in this case of Moses Mosley, the actor who was found sitting in the car with the gunshot. How did you determine if they shot themselves or someone else? What methods used to determine that?
Mm-hmm. Two things, powder burns, mm-hmm. and also I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's a condition where when one shoots themselves mm-hmm. with the gun, mm-hmm. that their limbs go into, it's a type of paralysis. Mm-hmm. So the gun is still being tightly held in their hand, unless there's something that happens where it falls away. But you wouldn't see a gun like 3 or 4 feet away with a suicide. That gun is going to be either in their hand or close to their hand. And that's one of the ways that you tell.
Because with this actor, they said the gun was in his lap.
Yeah, well, again, close to the hand.
That could be the case, in his lap.
Yes, and you'll see indication of powder burns on the hand mm-hmm. That fired the gun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's, the angle that the bullet, the angle of entry, all those type of things. Mm. But the powder burns around the wound, the position of the weapon after death, post-mortem, as they would say, those are all indicators.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, another myth that just came to mind that people used to say, oh, Black people don't get depressed, Black people don't kill themselves, is what they used to say. But yes, we do kill ourselves, so that's not true. And like I said, the rates among Blacks are increasing. Yep. So don't be afraid to ask someone. Do not be afraid, and let them know that you're there for them and you're going to be with them through the process, and that it's nothing to be ashamed of, and that it's really a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, to get help.
And I did mention about it's the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34.
Yes.
It's the fourth leading cause of death among people 35 to 44, and the fifth leading cause of death among people ages 45 to 54. So between 10 years old and 54, and the age of 54, it's between either the second or the fifth leading cause of death. So that's a whole lot of people. That's a lot of people.
What was that statistics? I think you said it was over was it like 47 million people died by suicide a year? Was it 47?
47,000.
47,000. Okay.
47,000 deaths in 2019. Okay. I think that's the latest year they had the figures for.
Okay.
And the sobering thought is that 12 million adults in 2019 seriously thought about suicide. 3.5 million made a plan, and out of that, 1.4 million attempted suicide. So my concern is that 3.5 million that made a plan, what made them change, and did they carry that plan out later?
Wow. I think I've read that I think half of suicides are by firearms.
Yeah, it's
Half.
could be accurate.
Mhm.
But there's also things where people do things that are a little bit more creative,
Mhm.
like the wrong way on the expressway. A lot of those are suicides.
Wow, there was one that just happened the other day, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, a lot of people, they realize that they don't want to be a financial burden on their family, so they try to make their suicide appear to be an accident.
Mm-hmm.
Those people who are who are in a place where they can think and plan that well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a lot of those are suicides, and some of those are just people who are drunk.
And then, of
But,
course, there's the suicide by cop. Suicide by cop.
Yes, and people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot.
So what was your experience when you were in the field in terms of suicide by cop? Was that something that you encountered? Or?
I never encountered it, but it happened frequently in my career.
Mm.
Yes. And it was and that's where the terminology came from, because you would have people who would point an empty gun at police officers, knowing that the gun was empty. And they would just do that because they knew the end result would be the police would shoot. And that's what usually happens. Suicide by cop. It's someone confronting police officers with an empty gun or doing something else crazy with the weapon.
I can't remember any instances, but I know from time to time there's been some, like in the media, suicide by cop. I just can't think of any offhand. Yeah.
And you'll actually have some who will come out saying, "Shoot me, shoot me." And sometimes it puts the officer in a bad position, because you don't know if a gun is empty or not. You don't know. You have to take that as a threat. And we do have non-lethal ways of handling that, but in an emergency, in a crisis, that may not be your option, especially if someone is 50 feet away with a gun. Your non-lethal solutions don't work.
Exactly. And again, this is something that needs to be taken seriously. Someone was pointing out how some people will say they're going to kill themselves. Like I had a patient, she told her mother she was going to kill herself, and her mother told her, go ahead and do it. You don't, do that.
Right.
If someone is, you take it seriously what they're saying.
I always use it real quickly. An argument, something that happened when I was in the Army, where a young man tried to slash his wrist with a pair of scissors. And he was taken to the emergency ward. It was a soldier. And the cuts weren't deep or serious. They'd stitched it up. And a doctor said to him, well, if you really wanted to commit suicide, you use a razor, not a pair of scissors. And doctor said that. This was back in the 60s. Things were different. And that soldier was discharged. He went home. He went back to his barracks. He found a razor, did it all over again.
Wow.
And this time he was successful.
Wow.
It was at a military hospital. So I found out about it because there were other medics that I knew who were witness of that, but they quieted that up with the doctor, with what the doctor said. But yeah, and I think a lot of that happens.
Wow, it does. So the final parting words I want to say is depression is treatable. Suicide is preventable. So take it seriously. Any last words you want to have, Norm?
No, all I can say is listen, pay attention to what people say.
Exactly. And the suicide helpline again is 1-800-273-TALK. The crisis text line, text home to 741-741. We appreciate you as our listening audience, and we look forward to bringing you more helpful information in 2 weeks. This is Mind Matters, and we're part of the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Our next show will be 2 weeks on February 23rd.